Hey there. So this is an excerpt from a customer call of ours. These folks were evaluating Elements initially because they had seen value in things like impact analysis and metadata dependencies, being able to integrate with their Jira ticketing system, uh, documenting the whole Salesforce change cycle. And they thought that was all well and good, but then they asked us, how do you guys use your product internally? And we thought it was a good idea to introduce them to Jack, who's our in-house business excellence manager, wears multiple hats. And essentially what he did and what you're about to see is him putting together various pieces into one bigger picture so you can understand how to most efficiently capture ideas and feedback, get them into production, and deliver on that Salesforce enhancement request most efficiently and effectively.
Okay, so I think the first thing, a bit, Conrad's introduced me as a business excellence manager, Salesforce admin. I think it's fair to say I wear several hats inside Elements. So admin, analyst, I do some configuration, no Apex, no code, mainly your point and click, flow, process builder, etc. I am the first point of contact, if you like, for end users in terms of them coming to me saying, look, Jack, it'd be great if I could do this inside Salesforce. I'd love to be able to record a particular data set. I'd love to be able to put some automation into this. I don't have to manually click through several record fields, etc. So the first thing we do in terms of my process, so we very much deal in terms of an implementation lifecycle. We tend to deal with the build, the documentation, processes. We do a bit of DevOps, if you like. But how I use the tool, what you're seeing at the moment is our feedback grid. This is inside the Elements application. Now, this feedback grid is all the end users that have used our Salesforce org. They're able to use our Google Chrome extension, which I'll show you in a moment, to be able to leave the admin feedback in terms on fields, on objects. So it's basically their way of coming to me as an admin and saying, I want this, it'd be great if, why don't we do this with this particular field? Now, how it looks inside Salesforce is these purple eyes here. So this is part of our Google Chrome extension. These purple eyes, the end user can go on and simply hit leave feedback, and you'll notice on this particular space object, there'll be several resolved bits of feedback. This is just the end user communicating with me what they want done, essentially. Now, what I do with that feedback is where Elements really comes in. So I manage all of our change, all of our Salesforce change inside of Elements. So be it new configuration, new business process, it's all done inside of Elements, and a lot of it does initially come from that raised feedback. So on a feedback here, I can add requirements and I can add stories. Now, a requirement for us, how we use requirements inside Elements, is basically what the business needs. It's a business requirement. Stories then tasks. So a story for me is something I need to do to be able to meet the overall business requirement, which we can document against this particular feedback. So if I go into our stories, so from here I can add a story.
Yeah, you can sync to Jira, but the cases, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, we'd have to link them manually.
Correct, yeah. You can use the URL library.
Right, yeah.
Which I can show you inside. We have a library of URLs. You can't sync them directly to a case, but you can take the URL of the story and then put it into a case inside Salesforce. If I quickly create the story, so the summary, a description, I'm not going to type anything out. Really importantly with our story, so this is where the analysis comes in terms of the analyst side of okay, so what I find with end users is they come to me with what they want, not what they actually need. So I want this, I want that. Now, what I tend to do at this section here is I document that as a want. I give it a risk, so low, medium, high, really simple. I can assign this to myself. a little bit of acceptance criteria, the role that's affected. You can link the story to a requirement if you want to. We're not going to in this case. And then this is where the Jira integration comes in. So we can hit EO connection. That's our elements operations inside Jira. If I hit attach, you'll then see against this feedback item, you have this story that I've just created. Go into stories. And I'm going to go to initial. And it'll be top of the list of assign that to me. It's in being defined status. And I've spoken about what they want, not what they need. And this is where I really get down to, okay, what do they actually need? So I've created my story. In here, you can do impact and complexity assessment, really simple drop-down lists. So this is, again, a bit of analysis. You can give a reason why you've given it a low risk. For how we work inside Elements day-to-day, low risk basically means we're going to do this straight into production. It's not going to affect any automations. Really simple story, really simple task, put it in production, get it off the worklist, move on. The impact stuff, we have overall impact, obviously dependent on these three fields here. We have technical, organizational, regulatory. So technical being, you know, does this affect a flow? Does it affect an Apex job that runs? Does it affect a process builder? Organizational impact, how does it affect our current processes internally? Do we have to have new process activities for the staff? Do we need to roll those processes out for the staff to be trained on? Regulatory impact, basically data protection, GDPR. Are we dealing with sensitive customer data? Complexity assessment, again, really simple technical data and architectural, kind of spins back into your impact assessment. But again, all low, medium, high, really simple. On a story, you'll notice you've got these collaboration tools again. Now, what I try to do, if I go back to my active stories, on the story, you can look back through the previous feedback. So we're seeing here, this is the feedback that initially raised this story. So this is what caused me to put this in my work queue. So Richard Parker came to me and said, we need to be able to set payment terms at the account level rather than space level. A bit more detail. That's essentially what he wants. It's a field. So all he wants to do is be able to set a field with a number of days. If I was an admin who didn't do the analysis side, who kind of just wanted it out of the work queue, I'd say, okay, great, we're just going to put this in production. You know, we'll create a number field. It'll be done within 5 minutes, and you can start documenting that. Problem with that is that it could affect other metadata in your org. So what I try to tend to do, and this is where the analysis really comes in, is essentially ask 5 whys, so 5 questions. So I do all of that here. So I'm collaborating, I've come up with suggestions, gets us both thinking about, okay, what is it you actually want rather than just needing a number field? So again, Richard's come back here with a lot more information, and suddenly we're actually diving into what he needs. And this is where I start documenting. I know what Richard needs, so now what do I actually need to build? And this is where this org model comes in here. So this is a basic ladder tree view of all of the metadata. Well, I say all of the metadata, most of the metadata inside of Salesforce. We look at objects, for example, and we go to custom, we'll go to standard. We'll look at the opportunity. And we'll go to fields, for example. So these are all the fields on the opportunity object. If I go to, for example, this one. So again, right-hand panel, very similar setup to what you see inside the app. These different icons are basically interactive tools that you can do with this particular field. So if I look at stories, so we can link stories and requirements to a field. So if I go and add a story, if I add that test story that I created there, so suddenly the work you've done behind the scenes in terms of your analysis, you're now bringing it into and documenting against the affected metadata that's going to either be obviously updated, changed, created, deleted, for example. So I've attached that particular story. From here, you can also add documentation. So when we first started using this, I got into the habit of what, how, why. So a little thing, visible as help. What is this field, how it works, and why did I build it? So I'm documenting as I build. You can add notes, URLs, data tables, images. You can add YouTube videos, embed them into notes if you really wanted to, for example. You can also attach process documentation. So this is a little screenshot of the process map that is affected by this particular field. So you can link metadata to stories, requirements, process maps. Internally, I write them. Really simple, as I want to, so that I can. And that's gathered by using the feedback tool, so collaborating with them for them to then write user story, which is then where we go into the analysis stage. Really cool thing inside Elements. So we've attached the story to this field. The stories, this field is going to be affected by this story, the change we're going to make. So before I actually dive in and build, what I want to see is, okay, so how is this field actually going to be affected by my new change? Because the last thing we want to do is put this in production because it's low risk. We've already determined that. Now this is a sanity check to think, okay, so where is this field being used? Because if I put this in and I break something, it could cause absolute chaos if you've got hundreds and thousands of users, because you might break a flow, you might break a process builder, for example. So this is where the dependency analysis and field impact really comes in. So I can see that this field is being used in these 3 flows. It's being used in a formula field. It's being used in 11 page layouts. Now what's really powerful is the dependency tree. This is a dependency we generated from this field. So it's telling you everything that is dependent on this field here. So again, we've got those 3 flows, takes you out into quick action, takes you into lightning pages. We expand all this. So we know that this flow is being, a process builder is then calling that flow. Any change to this field as part of the risk and impact, we start documenting the story we created at the start against these particular nodes as well. Because essentially what we want to do when we're building these stories and attaching them to org model nodes in the ladder view, we basically, how I treat it inside Elements is all of, there's only 2 here. If we had a longer list on the story, this is essentially my change set. So what I find really difficult as an admin inside Salesforce is building change sets can be really difficult because Salesforce has the dependencies in terms of not what's being touched by the particular field you're changing, but it may not be something that you've updated as part of your story. So your change set inside Salesforce can sometimes be bigger than it actually needs to be. But using this tool, you're essentially building your change set as you go. If you document your story properly against the org model nodes that are going to be affected, suddenly you have a change set and it becomes 10 times easier to build that change set because you've essentially already done the work inside Elements. You just need to create the change set and deploy because it's already here. This field, you can go in and show the planned outcome. So this story itself is just a cleanup story. I've been doing it today. Notice there's a couple of validation rules that we don't use anymore because of Brexit in the UK. We don't have to provide VAT numbers and opportunities anymore. So on the story, I've attached the validation rule inside the org model on the right panel. So they're the 2 validation rules that I know I need to delete. And then you go in, really simple. If I go create, for example, you now know you need to create a new validation rule. If I go back and put that back to delete, you can give a reason why. So no longer needed due to Brexit. Actual law, for example. And then that goes back to delete. So I'm basically what I'm going to change as I do my analysis before I make any change at all. I'm clear in my mind and I'm clear in the tool exactly what needs to be deleted, what needs to be created, what needs to be updated, created and updated. So I think if I show you our Jira integration, now I started using Jira probably, when did we build the integration? Probably about 12 months ago now, first. And our CTO very much jokes that I'm like a petri dish. So they build all this stuff and they kind of give it to me to play with and give a bit of feedback before it goes to market, if you like. My initial reaction of Jira for me is again, you guys may use it differently, but I probably only use 2% of the product. It was just too heavyweight for me. All I wanted to know, I don't really care about bugs. I don't really care about patches as such. Don't care about epics. I just want to know the overall business requirement and what I need to build. So Jira for me is extremely heavyweight, but if I show you what it looks like. So again, this is in a story. So when we created the story, we set up a connection here. EO connection, so Jira Dev project. This is already linked. If it was a new story, it would basically say send to Jira, like a click link. It will then create this URL, which basically then opens up all your Jira configuration. So this is the story inside Jira. It's two-way integration. So if I update anything in here, I'll update it back in Elements and vice versa. When I do use Jira, which is extremely rare, and the main reason is I'm only using 2% of the product. It's too heavyweight for me. Essentially, what I'm doing inside Elements is I'm doing my work in a story. I'm attaching it to an org model node, so I know what I'm changing inside Elements. And then the final part of Elements, which this is basically where I do my work from, is inside the release app. And this is where I do my releases instead of inside Jira. So our release app split into plan published. So this is plans, this is what's coming, what's late, and what's being published. If we click into this release here, this basically gives us a breakdown of all of our stories and requirements that we're going to do in this particular release and diagrams. But in this release, we're not affecting any process in terms of user process. So we're just sticking to requirements and stories. So there's 3 requirements in this release. Again, you'll notice the right-hand panel. You can see the stories inside the release management app that are attached to that requirement. Again, you can see all of the feedback and collaboration. So I've been speaking with our CEO about this particular requirement. He's yet to get back to me. And then finally, you've got stories. So these are all the stories that are going to be released inside this release. And as I mentioned, the change set, this is the best example we've got in terms of at the moment. So our CTO is dealing with our Apex side. Suddenly, he's documented this story against all of these nodes. So he knows exactly what's being created, what's being updated inside this story. And that's basically his change set. So that's what I do. This is essentially where I probably spend 80% of my day inside this release app. Yeah. And just my final comment is just on the deployment side. So I find when I'm deploying, it'd be really nice if I could just have a really simple checklist just to make sure I've got absolutely everything, like a post-release checklist. So when you release a flow, sometimes you have to go into production and activate that flow, which seems absolutely crazy because you're moving it, but that's Salesforce change sets. So I've gone to our product manager and said, look, Zavri, it'd be great if as part of this right panel, I could have a really simple tick list of, you know, okay, that's released and it's turned on. That's released, the documentation's there, just to make absolutely sure that as part of my change set and release, everything is ready and it's there. And you know, he was up for the idea. He's been developing it. So I think it's fair what Conrad said. We are slowly moving into that deployment world, if you like.
It's a natural progression for us.
Yeah, exactly. In layman's terms, yes, you can create requirement stories inside Jira and push it into Elements. Yeah, you can do that, and then you can document, you know, against nodes, etc. from Elements. Yeah, you can do that. The configuration is really simple. You just again, my Jira knowledge is pretty basic, but
you've got a video.
Yeah, it's a 2-minute video. I think it's not even. Yeah. It's really not complicated. So you set up a connection, set up a field inside Elements, so you can then obviously access that connection, hit a link. I mean, this is all non-technical. Yeah, so ours is dedicated with our product manager.
Ping us with any questions. And Jack, thanks for jumping on today.